Hello. The Guardian's always good for a laugh, isn't it? And here we have a great example of it, an article about why are people turning questionable politicians into pandemic pin-ups. And this is by Arwa Mahdawi in The Guardian. Now, it didn't surprise me. First of all, when I saw that the writer of this article is obviously from a Muslim background, and I think that, I've not done a poll on this, but I suspect, let's put it this way, that the Hindus and the Muslims from the Indian subcontinent who are living in Britain have a great deal of suspicion for each other. One of the the biggest difference between Hindus and Muslims, and I'm not talking about all Muslims actually at all, obviously, but I'm talking about a general cultural framework that they're in. Hindus have absolutely no interest in converting non-Hindus to Hinduism. Most of the time, they have no ideas about Hinduism ruling the world. They just want Hindus to remain Hindus, and that's it. They're quite happy with that. Obviously, there were some gurus who attracted people to their ashrams, and people like George Harrison, I suppose, and people like that became if not Hindu, at least partially so. But in general, the Hindu religion seems to have no particular urge towards world domination, whereas Islam does. However much an individual Muslim might be quite happy to live and let live, the general ethos of the religion is that everybody should be Muslim, with the exception of one or two smaller Muslim sects that I am excluding from this definition, because the two big ones are both violent and oppressive, and they are the ones who are calling the shots at the moment. So it doesn't surprise me when I find a woman from a Muslim background having a go at a man from a Hindu background. And I'm not suggesting that she is doing this because she's a Muslim and he's a Hindu. What I am suggesting, though, is that the general cultural milieu in which she spent her formative years would have an attitude towards Hindus which is not of the most friendly. The religion would say every day that these Hindus are a bunch of idolaters and should be not Hindus anymore. That's there in the religion, and even if her family was not religious, it would form part of the atmosphere of the conversation, let's put it that way. So it didn't surprise me. And there is something else that doesn't surprise me, because the Guardianistas, generally, that type of person, they seem to be the left, the far left types, the Owen Jones types. Owen Jones is not a Muslim, but he calls for Muslim values in many ways. That is the sort of oppression, not the oppression, the authoritarianism of the left is the same in many ways as the authoritarianism of Islam. That is, we are right, and anyone else who doesn't agree with us is not only wrong, but evil, and willfully wrong. They know they're wrong, but they're evil, so they can't help themselves, and we have to prevail, or evil is going to take over the world, because anything that isn't ours is evil. I mean, that could be said about people of Owen Jones's ilk, as well as people of Chowdhury, that lawyer in Luton. It's exactly the same attitude, just a different idealism, that's all. So when I see Guardian type women saying, oh, this is so surprising, I feel sexually attracted to Rishi Sunak, then and this is terrible. What are they actually saying? They're not. I mean, he's a fairly good-looking fellow. They've got a particularly unflattering picture of him here, but then, hey, this is the Guardian. They are not actually saying they feel sexually attracted to this man. What they are doing is belittling him. They're turning him into a sex object. They're saying that his brain is not what his human worth is. It's his sexual attractiveness. It's that sort of, the infuriating, the sidetracking strategy of many a male chauvinist who shouts, oh, you're so gorgeous when you're angry, to a woman who is criticising him in any way. It's the same attitude. So let's just have a look at this. Arwa Madawi says, one symptom of the coronavirus is losing your sense of taste. I mean, now this is a good writer. Give her her due. That's a very witty thing to say. Apparently this includes taste in men. Yeah. Oh, stop that. One of the more bizarre features of the COVID-19 crisis has been the emergence of pandemic pin-ups. Cabin fever is making us turn problematic politicians into sex symbols. You know, whenever I see that word problematic, I know I've got a problem. Because people who talk about other people or other attitudes being problematic, it means they disagree. It doesn't mean they're wrong. It doesn't mean they can prove anything. It just means they don't like it. And so they use the word problematic. Britain's quarantine crush is Rishi Sunak, the 39-year-old Chancellor who has won praise for his handling of the crisis. Okay, I report this with bile rising up my throat, but he is now known in some quarters as Dishy Rishi. He's not bad looking, but then people... I was just thinking, Boris Johnson is also a sexually attractive man by many comments and standards. Yeah, I think he is. I think Sunak is also an attractive man. That doesn't mean to say I'm swooning over either of them. It's to do with... Oh, let's put it this way. Keir Starmer is also a good-looking fellow, but I don't find him at all attractive. Not even in a technical way. So you may ask why. I know that Sunak and Johnson are both attractive men, and that Keir Starmer is a well put together physique, but still he's not an attractive man. And that's interesting in itself, isn't it? Okay, he's now known in some quarters as Dishy Rishi. Sunak is suddenly seen as sexy because we're despairing and he's vaguely competent. No, he's a lot more than vaguely competent. He's doing pretty well considering that the sky fell in a couple of months ago. A GQ article penned by Flora Gill, the daughter of the former Home Secretary Amber Rudd. Isn't that interesting how somebody from a political family finds a job writing articles for GQ? Just mentioning it. Opines that he represents hope that maybe the cabinet aren't all blundering, confused buffoons, that maybe we're going to be okay. Well, I'll tell you what, if the Labour Party were in charge of this, we would definitely not be all okay. And I have to say that the shadow cabinet is just full of blundering, confused buffoons. That's about the only quote from the article that is safe to reproduce, says Arwa Madawi. So, of course, since she considered it not safe, I thought, I'm going to have a look at that. So here is the article by Amber Rudd's daughter. Just don't forget that. I fancy Rishi Sunak, and after reading this, you probably will too. All right, well, no. Long is the history of horniness doing crazy things in isolation. No, you see, again, unless, I don't know how isolated you are, Miss Gill, but I suspect you're not more isolated than I am, and I'm not swooning over these guys. I'm just bloody glad that they are competent. The countrywide palpitations whenever I don't know, but I have noticed that lefties tend to have a tendency towards projection rather a lot, and I can see countrywide palpitations, no. Maybe with you though, and because you feel guilty, you feel like everyone else has to feel the same way, so you can feel less guilty. Just leave me out of this, mate. At first I feared I was the only one, alone in the dirty, inappropriate dreams giving me, oh, for God's sake. But one dark emoji-filled evening on WhatsApp, emboldened by the lack of face-to-face meeting, I owned up to my friends about my shameful new feelings, a deep desire for Rishi Sunak. Miss Gill, get a life. And then she was not alone. Well, you see, what she was not alone in was her friends. She has friends and they are all of the same mindset. And because of that, they all feel the same way about Rishi Sunak. Apart from that, Miss Gill, yes, you are alone. I'm sorry, you're very much alone. I am glad that this guy is a good mathematician or businessman or whatever. And that's about as far as it goes. So why are we thirsting? Why are we? Well, you. Fancying legislators is not a new thing. I'm not going to go through the whole thing while this girl dribbles over Rishi Sunak. Pleasant appearance helps in multiple areas of adult life. Yeah, I mean, we're all aware of that. A Harvard study titled Why Beauty Matters showed that physically attractive workers were offered salaries 10.5% higher than those less attractive. I want to tell you something interesting. Oh, I found it interesting. First of all, there are many people who are not that attractive, who act attractive. And because of that, they are attractive. One great example is Eartha Kitt. You look at her face. It's not an attractive face. It's not beautiful at all. It's very square, heavy-jawed, and it could be mannish in many ways, masculine, which is not considered attractive in a woman. But she was a very attractive woman. There's no doubt about it. And that was because of the way she held herself. Now, I'm thinking of a recent study in which it was talked about by Konstantin Kisin. I think he said it was his wife who was involved in this study. They got some reasonable looking people, ordinary looking students, and sent them out for job interviews and then asked them to come back and evaluate how the job interview was conducted, the attitude of the interviewers to them. Now, what they did was they put a scar, a prosthetic scar on these students' faces because they wanted the students to evaluate how people reacted to unattractive candidates with an obvious facial disfigurement. And then just before they went into the interview, they said, oh, hang on a minute, there's something wrong with it. And I'm just going to touch up the scar. And what they did was they removed it. So that person went into the interview thinking that they had a scar, which they did not have. And then when they came back, they were they gave the assessment. And in many cases, they said that they were less well treated than they would have been. And they picked on little comments that the interviewers made, or questions, which they said would not have been asked if they didn't have the scar that they didn't have. Which just shows you that, and it proves that your attitude to yourself is what convinces people what you are, rather than what you actually look like. Now, obviously, and I mean, the face is falling off, people are going to react, and there are some people who are so hideously disfigured, it is going to at least start off by giving a bad impression, because people are very, very hardwired to a face being normal. And even you can tell if somebody is has a psychiatric problem by how they react to a picture of a circle with two dots where eyes would be in an ordinary face and a dot where a mouth would be. And if it's the other way up and they don't notice the difference, you know there's something wrong with them. So obviously there has to be some cut-off points, but it's not the way an ordinary person looks that makes them attractive. It's the way they project to you, the way they hold themselves, the way they use their bodies. There's an actress who used to do work in the Carry On films. Oh yeah, Barbara Windsor. You may not know her name, but if you look at her, she always went as the busty blonde. Actually, she didn't have that big a bust, but she sort of stuck her chest out and wiggled, and that was the signal. I'm a busty blonde, and she managed to convey that image. And I'll try and find an image of her which shows her. And if you look at, the first picture you will get is she's a busty blonde. And then if you look at it, you'll think, not that busty after all. But that was the image she managed to project. So why Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson are sexy is the way they are projecting themselves as people of authority. People who know what they're doing, people who can take charge. And this woman is trying to belittle that because she can't believe that this guy is a conservative and worthy of taking charge. So what she's doing is, sort of, oh, you're so beautiful when you're angry-ing at the situation. And that's what this woman is talking about as well. They're possible to reproduce. All right, well, that's it. So all these, it's not, and I know Sargon said it's because these women like to be dominated. No, it's not that. They are actually trying to bring this guy down. They don't like the anti-authoritarian type of person they are. So they are trying to belittle them in another way. That's all. If you want to donate or contact, the information will be rolling over the Graniopteryx as I speak. Please like, subscribe and share because it does help with the algorithm. If you visit my channel on YouTube and one day discover that I've disappeared without warning, you'll still find me on Bitchute or Minds. Just go to either of those platforms and do a search for Graniopteryx. If you're already watching this on Bitchute or Minds, good for you. Meanwhile, if you're watching this on YouTube, remember that you must keep checking the subscribe and bell icons because occasionally they reset. Till next time.